Okay, we're good to go. Okay, so welcome. I am Christine Rose. I'm a business and executive coach based on the West Coast in the Seattle area, and I'm specialized on working with organizations that are small to medium-sized businesses and helping them to improve leadership, to create safe cultures for their employees or teams, and to help them increase their bottom line.
Great, thanks, Christine. So I'm Catherine Mayer, and I'm based on the East Coast in New York City. I have run a small executive coaching and leadership development firm, and I focus on mid to C-suite level leaders and work with organizations to help them really grow their women. A big part of it is leadership, women leaders. And I really help people play a bigger game. And if you notice, my background is the US Open, so that they want to play that bigger game and play at the US Open. So I'm thrilled to be here, and thank you for coming. So today's focus is on how to be a productive leader in a crisis. Christine?
Well, I'd like to start by just inviting everyone to be present in the room, let go of the urge to multitask and to, want to not be here, because we're going to get so much learning from the time. When we do speak, please go ahead and you identify yourself. We encourage people to keep it on gallery view so that you can be participating in the conversation, and use the chat box if you have questions. You can use it in real time, and when possible, we can stop to answer, or we'll also answer some at the end just depending on what's good for Catherine. Okay. Great.
Everybody okay? Any issues with Zoom or volume, or you can't see anything? Any issues? I know I always ask that. If you can't see or hear, you can't comment, but anybody having challenges so far? Nothing?
I'm Diane? Good now. Not initially, but I am now.
You're okay? Okay, all right. And Diane and our Basil, I think, any comments from you two? I haven't seen your videos aren't on, so can you see?
No, it's perfectly fine. My video won't work.
Okay.
It may work
okay.
On and off, yeah.
Okay, okay.
Otherwise, absolutely no issue.
You can hear. Okay, great. Diane?
I am fine as well, Catherine.
Good. Okay, great. Thanks for joining. Okay.
Okay, and we'd like to just start by inviting you to take some deep breaths. Take 5 deep breaths. Go ahead, and if it helps to close your eyes, just center yourself. Feel your feet on the floor. Just let your body rest in your chair and breathe in deeply. And exhale. Feel free to close your eyes if it helps, and just take in deep, full breaths. And just enter into the present. A few more breaths. Go ahead and just let everything else go away, fall off your shoulders. Breathing in deeply and release every stress and tension. Just let it fall away. And just take one more deep breath in and breathe out. And feel free to open your eyes and join us in this space right now, and enter the room, and let's see what we can learn right now together and participate in to make us better leaders and better servants where we are. Catherine?
Great, thanks, Christine. I feel better already. Okay, so today's session is focused on this idea of how do you balance the needs of people in a crisis with getting things done. We're going to give you a very simple model that's been around for decades that will help you understand sort of where you are now, what your usual tendency is, and increase the options that you have to balance this idea of people needs and business bottom line needs in a way that builds trust. Because sometimes we have to make decisions in a crisis that that erode trust. But the more very intentionally you can be, the better. And this is really near and dear to my heart because as a tennis player, and it's something I learned as a competitive athlete, the person who wins is the person who adapts the most quickly. And that really is the big focus, is how do you learn to adapt most quickly? And that's what I've seen as somebody who does executive coaching. And I love to begin with this quote because Churchill, a lot of quotes have been floating around during a crisis. His name comes up a lot. And this one I really like because it says, when we enter into the situation, it's really with considerable strengths, which position us well to lead. And I think many times when you go into a crisis, if you're unsure, what happens is we think, oh, you know, what are my strengths? We focus on more what we don't have, what is going wrong or what we are afraid of. And what makes us all successful is our strengths. So keeping that in mind, that you have strengths that will make you successful here, the key is to be aware of them and know how to use them. Weird things are happening. So as someone who's been doing coaching over the last 15 years, the last 3 months, I've seen some incredible changes in a 3-month time period. And I'm just going to mention 3 specific stories. And these pictures are not really related to them, but sort of feelings that and observations that I've had of these clients. So we'll start up on the left with this lovely lady smelling the flowers. This reminds me of a male client that I've been coaching. His name, we'll call him John. He was more like the Army generals or sergeant in the corner there that was like a real like competitive, telling everybody what to do. And we've been working together over the past year and mostly focused on how to listen and be a little nicer. And all of a sudden COVID hits and he's in the mall industry. So that's not exactly a great industry to be be involved in during a pandemic. So all of a sudden, everybody's freaking out, business is going south, and he really turns to become more like this woman. He starts listening, becoming more accommodating, and people start, coming up with new ideas. It really helps him engender more of an environment, a safer environment where innovation can happen. But it was really an amazing shift. The second story is related to the bingo there. This one woman I've been coaching for about 1.5 years. I'll call her Joan, senior leader in the retail business, another challenged business during this time, but very collaborative person, really greatly respected and liked by her team, unlike John. And when she asked her team, how are we going to get together? How can we keep having a sense of fun? Her team member said, well, how about playing bingo on a weekly basis? And she was like, bingo? That's not really something I'd really want to be doing, but she went with it. And she said she would look forward to it on a weekly basis. So this was, this very stiff, very conservative woman was playing bingo on a weekly basis. And it was enabling her to connect with her team in a way that she really couldn't. And it really helped her team relax and ride out the crisis with camaraderie. The third story is related to that Army sergeant there. And it reminds me of this woman that I have been working with over the past year. We'll call her Dolores. She's a COO of a mid-sized finance company, financial services company. And she was more like the woman up on the left. She was the ultimate accommodator, always making her boss look good. Everybody loved her. And then they gave her the assignment to be in charge of implementing changes around COVID-19. So all of a sudden, overnight, she became like the Army general. We have to close down, people have to wear masks, she really transformed. But because she had built up so much trust and was well-liked, she was really able to do it in a way that people could accept and follow. And so all 3 of these leaders really adapted incredibly quickly and in ways that really surprised them and me as well. And that to me was really the sign of a successful leader. And I'm going to use this background to talk about these 5 approaches that I saw these people use and adapt to. And then we'll have you all take a poll on the to see which one you are using right now during this crisis. And this is based on a very famous instrument called the Thomas Kilmann, which was developed back in the 60s. And it's called the conflict mode instrument. I'm calling it 5 approaches to productivity, because the minute you hear conflict, most people think it's very negative. But to me, I really like it because it's a situational based assessment. It's a self-assessment. And what it asks you to do is look at task on the left, people on the horizontal axis. What is more important to you at any given time? Is it the task? Is it the people or the relationships? And most of us have a preference. Most of us tend to be more task oriented, more relationship, and it's going to vary to the situation. So I'm going to explain these really briefly, and then we'll take the poll. So the compete, we'll start there, as you can see, is high task, low people. So task is more important than people. And this is really important, and especially during a crisis, sometimes you really have to put the task ahead of the people, and not everybody's going to love what you choose, but it's critical to make that choice. But you need to be very careful when you use compete, because it does erode trust. It is the go to war type of choice, but it is a very important one to have. Collaborate, this is where task equals people. And most people, when they take this, they think, oh, I really want to be that collaborative person. Collaborative is not better than any of these. And in fact, none of these is better than the other. Collaboration is really useful when you need to innovate, meaning you need a lot of time. The big downfall with collaboration is it takes a lot of time to get underneath and get at what's driving people, what do people care about? Because what you've really got to do to collaborate successfully is listen to everybody's needs and concerns. And the whole goal is to create something bigger, different, new. That's very important, obviously, in a crisis. Compromise, win some, lose some. You know, this is where nobody really sort of gets what they want, but this is really important because it's all about speed. You use compromise when you need to make fast decisions. And a lot of people who work in large organizations, this is their go-to approach in normal times, because you have to move fast and you have to make a decision. Avoid, is in the corner there. It looks like neither task nor people are important, but as someone who's given this to thousands of people over the last 15, 20 years, what I see when people have high avoidance scores is they tend to be the real diplomats. They tend to be the people that think, do I really want to confront that person? Maybe I should just let that go. They tend to really think about relationships and value that more. Not always, but that's what I've noticed. As most people, when they see if they get high scores on avoidance, they think, oh, that's terrible. But it's not, because if you're a strategic avoider, you're diplomatic and you choose which tasks to focus on. And then lastly, accommodate is where people come before tasks. So a classic example of accommodation is delegation. When you delegate a task to somebody, they may not do it that well, but it's a longer term strategy. Accommodation is very important for the longer term. And again, in normal times, if people get high accommodation scores, they think, oh, I must be a terrible leader. I'm too nice. But accommodation has a very important role. I remember once an investment banker asked me to do this instrument for his team of all male investment bankers. And the real reason he wanted his team to take this is because there was no accommodation going on in his team. Nobody was helping anybody out. And it was getting in the way of their camaraderie and their success. So it has an important role, but it is more longer term. Any questions before we're going to go on to the poll? Any questions about this? Okay, so here's what I want you to do. We're going to have the poll come up. I want you to, what happened here? So I want you to pick which one you're using right now. Or if you want to do it for your, people you coach, that's fine too. What do you think they're using most often, or what are you using most often during this crisis time? Can those of you on the phone, Diane and Faisal, can you complete this or no?
I just,
Yeah, I can certainly see it. I've completed it.
Okay, you have. Great. Okay.
I've completed it as well, Catherine.
Okay, great. Awesome. Okay. All right, so I think we've got everybody completing it. Okay. So let's share the results. So if you look at the results, can everybody see them?
No, they've just, again. There you go.
There you go. Okay. So 50% say collaborate, number 1, accommodate, number 2, and compromise, number 3. No competing, which is interesting, or no avoiding. So I'd love to hear from, one of the collaborators and one of the other folks. Anybody want to jump in? It's obviously anonymous, whoever wants to jump in. I'd love to hear from 1 or 2 people. Why did you answer what you answered?
I can speak to start with. So you asked, where are you right now?
Yeah, right now.
At the very beginning, I was in compete.
Mm,
We gotta do, how are we gonna
makes
do
sense.
it? Yeah, then I moved to accommodate as I realized people are working from home with children and all the other issues. And I kind of pulled back on the, we need to get stuff done because it was hard enough, in their world. And now I've moved to, okay, we've got to figure out how we're going to move forward. I'm getting a survey with my employees. We're going to have a balance of working from home, in the office. What does that look like? So I think I've moved through multiple stages at this point.
Yeah,
so right now I'm in collaborate.
But that's perfect, Kathy. That's exactly what good leaders do, right? So now you're at collaborate. So you're really trying to figure out how to move forward. Yeah, makes perfect sense, Kathy. Thank you. Awesome. Who else wants to jump in? Anybody else want to jump in and comment? Anybody else?
Catherine, it's Diane.
Yeah, hi, Dan.
I'm typically working with a lot of startups, turnarounds, and I find that collaborate is my go-to for, it hasn't really changed in this crisis for me because the way they work is very different. So I'm always winning some and losing some. Having the children work from home, I think has made me take a step back on some of the tasks that need to get done, but ultimately I do finance, so it does need to get done if the business is going to move forward. So I find that I'm pretty much in compromise most of the time, and it hasn't really changed all that much, with the exception of a child asking for, oh, I need breakfast, and oh, can I call you back while I get the child breakfast? So other than that, I'm pretty much operating the same way.
Interesting. Okay.
I'd just like to sort of mirror and amplify what everyone just said, is because you can't stay in one spot anymore.
Right.
To start in collaboration, which is a natural for me, but to everyone's point, you have the kids walking behind people, and it's so hard for women especially to focus right now. So if they, I'm accommodating. You need to leave now, no problem. And if we were working on something specific, I'm going with the flow. And, I'm much more in tuned to where they are at that very moment. And I'm not pushing them outside their comfort zone unless it's something that's really critical to get the business done.
Yeah, it's interesting. No, thank you, Anne. So let me just close that out. So, that's basically what you all are saying is really what I've seen in leaders. And the reason why it's so important, like Anne, what you're saying, and Kathy and Diane, yours is a little bit different, but it's still the adapting, is that when people are in a crisis, we tend to get more negative, like that amygdala hijack, if people know what that is, right? Where you get hijacked and you get stuck in negativity. And that's when thoughts available to you are very limited. They're fixated, they're more predictable. And the goal is, if you want people to come up with new ways of working, to relax, to keep growing, you need more positive emotions. And that's really, when you have positive emotions, they produce patterns of thoughts that are more unusual, flexible, creative, and lead to more creative actions. So, that's why, if you think about it, that's why accommodation, we'll just start with that, is so important. In normal circumstances, if people are high or overusing accommodation, that's usually not a good thing. Like too much accommodation is looked at like, oh, it's not a good thing. And I've had women, especially when they take this, because women, you tend to see this more, they'll show me their results and they'll be like, I'm hopeless. Like I have no future, you know, because they think of it in that way, in such a negative way. But now I think basically the real golden rule is we need to increase that accommodation. We have to really be a lot more accommodating, because that's what's going to, you know, adapt and help people adapt and relax a little bit more. The collaboration, I think, is the next thing, you know, and especially, Kathy, as people move to reopening, I think you're going to see a lot more of that, right? Because it's like, how are we going to work now, right? How is that going to be? We're going to have to, I talked to a friend of mine on the phone last night, and she works in Washington, D.C., and she's a single mother. Some of their folks in her office are going back to work, but she's not until September, right? So it's not going to be the same for everybody, right? It's going to have to be different. And I think in the past, collaboration based on the research, and there's decades of research related to this, Thomas Kilmann, is the only one of those 5 modes that's consistently related to people who are in C-suite. So meaning C-suite leaders, if you want to be successful, collaboration needs to be one of your top 2, you know, go-to approaches. I think in this crisis, people are using it even more, right? They're looking for it. They're saying, I don't know. They're opening up conversations, really trying to encourage it.
Catherine, can I interrupt for a
Yeah,
second?
of course. Yeah, go
Because
ahead.
I also think they're more open to it. At least that's what I found in my
Yes.
organization. So I
Yes.
work in the diversity and inclusion function of a large law firm, and you know, D&I as a function, by definition, has to collaborate across all kinds of,
Right.
right? But I
Yeah.
mean, the amount of support that we're getting now is just qualitatively different, or the kind of support, or
Right.
and willingness to try new things.
Right.
I mean,
Right. But that's
it's
the
just, like,
that's the
shocking.
beauty of, right. That's the
I
beauty
mean, I'm like,
crisis, right?
I send something to somebody, and they're like, "Okay, let's try this." And I'm like, "Really? That would have taken 6 months, a year
Right.
ago.
Normally.
It
Right.
takes a day." I really think that. I mean, I think that, like, positive sense, what's come out of this is that we all
Yeah.
understand how adaptable we all are, and
Yes.
our organizations are, because we've had to be.
Right.
Well, anyway, I just wanted to
Yeah.
share that.
No, that's great. But I think that's it, right? The ones that can, if you want to move fastest and be more successful, you need to be more open, right? I mean, that makes perfect sense. Thank you, Anne. And the compete, you know, like Kathy said at the beginning, she was in compete mode. And Diane, I know for your job, it sounds like, you know, you still have, you do help startups with finance. There still has to be, like, we still have to be ready to compete, right? There's still some, you know, things that are really important. And I think the more transparent and honest you can be, the better. But, you know, in normal times, too much competition, it really creates more problems. I'm curious, in your organizations, how is that showing up now? Do you see it? Or, you know, Anne is doing coaching and stuff. Do you see it is it still pretty alive and well, or? I'm curious. Meaning, are they making decisions pretty fast and kind of saying this is the way it has to be, or not so much?
No, like I said at the beginning, when I, was making the decision to close our office, that was not a choice anybody had. That was a decision I made. How we did our work, was a combination, but it's like, here's what we have to do. So let's figure out how. But I don't see it now, but then, I'm blind to my own stuff. So.
Right. So it's a little more on the collaboration. Anne, what were you going to say?
I would say something similar. I have seen, to your point about the about the compete. It's how you choose to compete now.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, and that I think is the subtle point to stress is that, and I stress this to my clients, is you must be honest and transparent and just the things that you've mentioned here, and timely. That's the other thing.
That's a good point.
Timely is probably the only thing I would add to that list.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Right. Because it is very timely. Yeah. And then the last one, the compromise.
I would sort of agree with
Go
her
ahead.
too.
Go ahead, Faisal. Go ahead.
Sorry. I would agree with that. I think the definition of compete has changed a bit
Mm.
in this context.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so it's more about being.
And this accommodation is right. It's situational accommodation.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yep. Yep. Very much so. Mm-hmm. More situational versus in normal times, it's looked at more of a longer term strategy. You know, you're helping people out for the longer term. This is really like right now you need to do it for the short term to keep people, calm people down, you know, connect with them. So it's much more situational.
See, it's also contextual as well. See, it's a cultural aspect as well, because in Pakistan right now, it's a different environment. Well, it's pretty. It's the same environment all across the world. That's given. But then out of that, then it's the cultural piece that is a subset of the whole overall global aspect. Where accommodation is it's seen has to be done at this moment, and nothing else takes precedence. Like there's no concept of competing at this time at all. It's more about just accommodating for the time being. And pretty much, I know it's the East Coast is going through the same situation.
Oh yeah. And what's interesting about that, if you look at the compromise, now Diane, I'd love to hear what you think. But the compromise, you know, when I work with a lot of leaders in normal times, right, compromise usually is one of their top two approaches that most people are compromising. But now, I don't hear it that much. I don't hear a lot of compromise. Some, but it's more accommodation.
Well, I have to compromise again because, I mean, I'm dealing with different types of companies and a lot of them have cash flow issues. So we definitely need to have the financial numbers available to analyze to, you know, for ongoing business. But like I said, there's a sense of, okay, what's really due now and what can be pushed out a little bit further. You know, some companies are more financially stable than others. So those that aren't, we do need the data in a timely manner in order to get the work done and analyze it. And then, like I said, but you're also taking into consideration and accommodating, you know, pushing calls out because something popped up. I have one client in particular who's an app developer, and he has a situation where both he and his wife are working from home. They have 2 children who are in elementary school. So they've divided up their time as to who takes care of the children when, and who gets on calls at other times. And inevitably, one of the children comes into the call when I'm on it, or the call gets moved. But, you know, it is what it is. You just have to go with it. And I find that I constantly have to keep guiding them to and
stay
following up
focused.
to make sure to move the process forward.
Yeah. So it's a combination of compromise and a lot of accommodation on a lot of accommodation. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, more accommodation now, Catherine, than you know, generally in a good, healthy environment.
Right. And I think that's what everybody's saying. And the last thought I want to leave you with before we end the formal part and open it up to smaller groups for those who want to stay is I live in the state of New York, and our governor, Andrew Cuomo, that's his picture, has been saying, I don't know a lot. And I think what's interesting to me about him is I always thought he was a reasonably good governor, but I always thought he was incredibly arrogant. And I don't know, wouldn't be something I would think would come out of his mouth on a regular basis. And because of the COVID situation, he was doing daily briefings for about 3 months. And you would hear him say, well, I don't know when it's going to end. I don't know the answer to that. I'm not a doctor. And that, to me, I don't know, is really a very collaborative response, right? Because he opened up to other people to come in, you know, and his now deputy, who's a woman, has gotten a lot more press and a lot more, has a lot more presence, but he's allowed that. And that's, to me, I think what a good collaborative leader does is, and he's still, I'm guessing he's still the same person, Cuomo, but he's been leading more with collaboration and accommodation than he has with compete. He certainly has, the compete certainly comes in when he threatens to shut the bars down or whatever, but, you know, but he leads a lot more with this accommodation and collaboration. And that's, I think, a sign of a good leader, that they adapt to the crisis. So I'd love to hear from what your takeaways are. And for those who want to stay, we'd love to have you stay. And for those who need to go, you know, we really appreciate the conversation. So I'd love to hear from people. What's been interesting and useful? And any final questions before we divide up into breakout rooms.
Catherine, if I could go first, it's
Yeah.
Ann Parks. Well, I loved how you took an age-old instrument in the TKI and put a positive spin on it. So I have taken my notes here, and I really like how you used this model to, you know, deal with a crisis and to get to have people think about the fluidity of it. So
Yes.
thank you for giving me an instrument I've been using forever with a new twist. So I thank you for that. And I am afraid I'm going to have to run as
No problem. And I can send you these slides too, Ann, because part of it is I reframe it. Because when you look at, if you look at, read how the TK, how they word it, they say they basically, it's very judgmental. And
Oh, very much so. Yeah.
so I just take away all that judgmental stuff and say, what's more important, task or people? And once people get that, it really has a whole new frame to it, right? So I'll send you
I've
the
always used the task and the people version of it to break it down.
Right.
But to actually apply it to a real life crisis right now makes it come a little bit more to life. And I like how you did it.
Good.
So thank you.
Good. Thanks so much for joining, and have a good one. Have a great weekend. Great. Thank you. Who else wants to comment? Bye.
Catherine, I would second
yeah.
Ann's comments. It was good to have a look at this and kind of, you know, refresh your mind on all of this. So I found it very informative, and I thank you all.
Thank you.
But I am also going to have to leave the conversation as well.
No problem. Thanks so much for joining, Diane. It's great to connect again sometime. I appreciate it.
Take care.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
How about the others?
Thank you. Thank you, Christine and Catherine. It was quite a reminder of all the things that we must do, especially the accommodation piece, and not consider that a compromise, and keep the cultural contextual piece in mind. Because here in Pakistan, it's we have a huge, we have a 50% workforce comprised of females, and many of them are, it's a mix, single mothers plus everything else. So it's as one of the leaders, you have to remember that it's not because it's a challenging time. It's challenging for them to be at home. And it's challenging for anyone to be at home at the moment, and especially here in a context of where they don't have a small office, home office sort of environment in their house. So that creates a bit of distraction to work at home as well. It's been difficult, but learning about that and how to manage the diversity piece and keep reminding yourself it's very important.
Great. Thanks so much for joining. It's great.
Yes. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording now. And
we can, I don't know, how many are going to stay? Because I think we've got a small group. I think we should just keep it in one room, Christine.
let's do that. So I'm going to
Yeah.
go ahead and stop the recording at this point.